about, protecting its network and thus its sensitive data. Virtual machines and cloud computing are quickly eliminating traditional data security boundaries. We all know that. Where a definable, protectable perimeter once surrounded corporate data centers, for example, enterprise digital assets have become scattered across multiple on-prem and public cloud IT environments. The distributed nature of data across dissimilar IT environments has created a new security challenge for enterprises. Well, we know some of these very disturbing statistics. There's a hacker attack every 39 seconds. The average cost of data breach in 2020 will exceed 150 million US dollars. Each year, ransomware attack cost businesses a reported $75 billion. According to Gartner, cybercrime damages will rise to 6 trillion by 2021. Well, with so much at risk, no enterprise can afford to sit still when it comes to cybersecurity. But how can enterprise strategies evolve to address the dynamic and borderless nature of today's digital resources? So the major challenges that have to be addressed, and I'm sure the speakers today will articulate in more detail, are number one, the disintegration of physical boundaries or the perimeter, as we say. Very importantly, the insider threats, right, which is considered the greatest data security risk posed into an organization. Number three, the devious rise of ransomware. We keep hearing about it day in and day out, right? How much damage it's causing to individuals or corporates, which usually spreads between machines and all, has now begun infiltrating data centers as well. So without much, let me just have the honor to introduce our guest. We have a very distinguished panel today to deliberate on this topic and address the issue with advanced tools and technologies. Let me introduce them to the audience before I hand it over to them. Rajesh Dudu, Global Practice Leader, Blockchain, Business Head, Cybersecurity, APJ in India at Tech Mahindra. Rajesh is a blockchain cybersecurity leader for the IT giant Tech Mahindra. He was instrumental in establishing blockchain practice at Tech Mahindra that made blockchain real and valuable for several global customers. And his leadership, the TechM has been recognized as one of the global blockchain leaders by several leading analysts. Industry bodies like World Economic Forum and governments like State Government of Telangana have recognized his efforts and contribution made to the industry in whole. And Sunil Bangalore, he is the president and CEO of SecureX Inc. Sunil Bangalore, I always confuse that, the last name was representing his place he's coming from, but that's not the case. But Sunil Bangalore is the president and CEO of SecureX Inc., which is a venture of Hinduja Group. His primary responsibilities include defining, developing, and delivering cutting-edge cybersecurity solutions to global clientele. At SecureX, he has been passionately involved in identifying and solving cybersecurity challenges arising out of emerging technologies such as IoT, industrial automation, and Industry 4.0, and increased adoption of endpoint devices, cloud workloads. Welcome to both of you, and thanks for joining this session, gentlemen. Alrighty, so let me start off, a question. Let me just have Rajesh start on it. Rajesh, this kind of a context that I've set, and there's so many threats around, we would like to understand, right? What is zero trust? Is it an idea, a feature, or a product? And why is it needed? Go on, Rajesh.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bharanit. First of all, thanks for the opportunity and the very kind introduction of mine and Sunil. It's a pleasure to interact with you and also the fellow members of HICIA. So what I've done is, since it is a very new concept and one of the latest trends that is happening in the cybersecurity space, so I took the liberty of assembling few slides so that I stay focused and also give a concise information and also concise insights pertaining to zero trust. So in terms of, if you see the conventional approach from a security perspective, it is like a castle and a moat kind of an approach, where people say that as long as you're within the perimeter of an organization or a corporate network, the assumption is that all the systems and the users who are within that perimeter can be trusted. This particular approach is very, very flawed. It is not applicable in the current context because it does not cater to the current working styles, especially when people are bringing their own devices or bringing your own cloud. And what it does is an attacker can compromise a single endpoint within a trusted boundary, and that gives an attacker an opportunistic entry into the entire network. So this erstwhile and the traditional approaches are not applicable anymore. And I put together some data points as to why the network and users cannot be trusted anymore. This is based on various attacks that have happened with respect to the corporate perimeters or the enterprise networks in the recent past, and it is also based on the behavior of the corporate users or the enterprise users. The 4% of the end users will click on anything. They're not very careful in terms of what is coming. And I must confess that recently I got an email from our office, which said that the online storage is reaching its threshold, and you need to look into your inbox settings. And I just ignored it because I knew that our organization, especially at a particular level, gives unlimited storage. And of late, over the last 2 days, my inbox was not working properly. So I went and retrieved that particular email, and I clicked on it, and I was surprised. It said it's a phishing campaign which has been put together by TechEm's ISG, Information Security Group, and you have just been phished. And I said, my God, how can I be phished? And then when I went and saw, the email came from Microsoft Online. T was missing. Microsoft Online, it was Microsoft Online. So the users, you can just correlate to something which has happened, and you without performing proper checks, you will click on anything. And the data suggests that 4% of the end users do that, and 28% of the attacks involved inside actors. The recent thing that was happening with Twitter, where a lot of the entire Twitterati has been taken by storm about attack in Twitter, they kind of concluded that particular cyber attack has happened because there were inside people who are involved in that. And then 17% of the breaches had errors as casual events. So with all this happening, the network and the users cannot be trusted anymore. So comes zero trust network architecture as a perfect solution, wherein it changes fundamentally the approaches that people have been using traditionally. So what does it change? It eliminates the concept of trust based on network location within a perimeter. Doesn't mean that you are within a perimeter, doesn't mean that everybody has to be trusted. And it also brings in a paradigm shift with respect to trust and verification. Initially, the aspect was like trust everyone and don't verify anybody. Then it moved to trust everyone but verify always. It is now with zero trust, as the name suggests, it moves to an application or a methodology or a concept wherein it says that don't trust anyone and always verify. So what it does in terms of to demystify, it basically checks the device as well as users. So when a user is logging to a corporate network remotely or within the perimeter, it basically validates whether the user is exactly the same person as he or she is claiming to be. And do you have a fingerprint of the device from which the user is establishing a connectivity? So by performing these kind of checks, it is going to establish whether the user is an authenticated user or not. And if the user details do not match, and the device details that the user has furnished at the point of registration do not match, the request to connect to the corporate network or to an application within the corporate network, it gets denied. So it does in terms of verification of the user, verification of the device, and it also limits the access and privilege, and it learns on the fly so that the adaptation also happens on the fly. So what are the core values of zero trust? We all know that in today's scenario, everybody is working from home. So as a result of which the corporate network and the corporate perimeter has expanded. And when the corporate network and the corporate perimeter has expanded, all the cyber actors are going after that. In fact, with another partner of us, we've been able to establish that the corporate perimeter is under the siege. So what it does is, first of all, it anonymizes the corporate network so that the corporate network is not identifiable by the other cyber actors or the threat actors. So you can't attack what you don't see. It reduces, not only reduces the attack surface, but it also anonymizes the attack surface. And it also prevents three most important things. It prevents credential theft through phishing, the experience that I gave, and also through attributes like brute forcing and keyloggers. It prevents server exploitation, and it also prevents hijacking of connection, especially through MITM attacks, which is man in the middle attack. And what it also does is it brings in agility and reduces the complexity. You will be able to introduce what we call as the software defined perimeters, and also anonymizing the corporate networks by touchless deployment of this zero trust network architecture. And it also brings in terms of scale up and down with use, and also gives the ability to the either to the infrastructure management groups or through the information security personnel, the ability to add and remove applications on the fly. So in essence, what it does is what we call as the software defined perimeter. It basically brings zero trust on the network, zero trust on the identity, and zero trust device posture. So let me explain. So the network zero trust comes from a perspective of hiding the endpoints. You're no more displaying your endpoints out in the open, as a result of which, when you hide the endpoints, the user's device and server will help in terms of it is basically protected from attack. And along with this, you also bringing in a port level restrictions, basically to allow customers to ensure only the valid users can access their servers. That's point number one. Point number two, zero trust on identity. It's basically utilizing an identity provider first to authenticate, and then only the connection is established. And with respect to the device, I said in terms of if the device fingerprinting does not match, then if somebody is planning to connect to a corporate network or access a remote application, since the device posture has failed and the device fingerprinting has failed, that person will not be able to access the corporate network at all. So in essence, it's a complete zero trust, not at a single level, but at a multiple level. And basically the zero trust and also the software defined perimeters will basically establish access which is defined by the user, and the device which has been established or the device which has been shared by the user, and also the context in which it has been established. And what it does is authenticate the users before a connection has been established. And it also helps enterprises to create agile perimeters. You can expand, you can reduce, you can hide the identity of a perimeter all in the real time. In addition to that, it facilitates automated key management. And in addition to that, what I said before, the hackers cannot attack or cannot hack what they can see. So it is anonymizing the corporate network, and it can be deployed either on premise or it can be deployed in a hybrid kind of a cloud environment. In essence, it is going to give you what we call as a perimeter overlay, that too in a dynamic fashion, and it helps people to establish secure tunnels for accessing critical systems. So what happens is, it also leverages what we call as the micro segmentation. Let's say that a particular user has established a connection using this architecture, either for a corporate application or an internet session, and now that particular connection has been compromised by a cyber attacker. Even when the particular session has been compromised by a cyber attacker, the cyber attacker gains access only to that particular micro segment of the session. The ability of that cyber attacker using that session, the compromised session, as an opportunistic entry point and move laterally within the corporate network is severely constricted. They won't be able to move laterally. They won't be able to access the other corporate elements, as a result of which the damage, if at all, is limited to that particular session, to that particular micro segment. This is what Zero Trust does in a nutshell. Back to you, Bharani.
That's quite amazing. It's very, very interesting kind of a development that I see, because to be able to mitigate the challenges that we have today, it's absolutely very, very important to just, implement zero trust, kind of in many enterprises. And what I really liked about it is that agile perimeter, because with all this advent of cloud computing and virtualization, I'm sure the agile parameter is the way to go. So I think very, very interesting insights, Rajesh. Really appreciate that. And over to Sunil. So now we just talk about, we already have other security solutions, right? That's typically every organization would just talk about, right? We already have some security solutions. How will zero trust affect those investments? Because eventually, the end of the day, the cybersecurity investments, I'm very, very, very unfortunate to make that observation that many organizations are not doing it because, it's expensive or something. It is not really, but eventually the kind of impact that the security threats are creating without any such cybersecurity, solutions are going to be huge. Companies have just come down to the knees, and because of some of these, malwares, or say whatever may be different kinds of threats, vectors. The companies have come down to the knees, and they've just been absolutely not performing business, and the critical operations have come to standstill. So with all that, still companies are thinking this as a huge investment. But now with that thought process, right, when they already have that, some of the security solutions implemented. So how will this zero trust affect those investments which are already made? Sunil.
Thanks, Bharani, and thanks, Rajesh, for setting the context with zero trust, what I call as the new norm of operating the businesses going forward. I think zero trust is not something new. I think if you really look at that conceptually, I mean, we don't let strangers get into our house. We don't let any strangers sit next to us when we have some bank transactions to be operated. I mean, we are as human beings, we have always been very much cognizant of what zero trust means. I mean, we don't believe unless there is some level of authentication happening when we engage with anybody or when we are in an environment of any transaction. If you use the same analogy and take it to probably a digital world, which is where we are all living in, or at least getting to the digital world, the zero trust comes from few known actors. Unlike in a human interface where you look at somebody carrying a gun or carrying a weapon or carrying some sort of a, a posture that you feel may be not what trustworthy to engage with or allow them to access your perimeter. The same way, we need to put certain level of zero trust guards, what I call in terms of ensuring you keep an eye on such actors. So the good thing about zero trust, in my opinion, is how do you identify those actors is not at all expensive. I think you absolutely said it right. It's common sense. It's a very interesting common sense that we all grow up with and we are exposed to that. I don't go in the middle of the night in a ATM and try to withdraw cash when I know there is a set of people watching me sitting on a two-wheeler, right? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Similarly, in a digital world, as Rajesh was alluding towards, there are certain practices that you need to be aware of that you should be doing. Number one is don't touch anything that comes into you to act upon, which you don't know the authenticated source. So how do you define that is your list. It's like your good boys and bad boys list where you prepare, you may be erring, but erring on the right side is much better than erring on the wrong side. So I strongly recommend that the investment on any zero trust environment adoption should start with awareness. I think if you really start to build significant awareness on what is zero trust, what does it mean in the context of my business, what does it mean in the context of my digital environment, is the fundamental prerequisite for us to even embark on this journey of building business resiliency and business success parameters in a completely zero trust environment. I mean, look at what happened after 9/11 in the entire transportation or public industry. Everybody is frisked, everybody is suspected as a terrorist, everybody is suspected as somebody who may be carrying a weapon or some level of damaging material. I mean, we all go through it. There are no exceptions. Even prime ministers and presidents may go through a different protocol of frisking and searching, but nobody is exceptionally allowed. It's a zero trust environment today. If you look at the travel industry, if you look at some of the what we call as public entertainment industry, it's a zero trust. It took some time for people to adapt, get acclimatized, get to understand do's and don'ts. But it's very important that the awareness that brought 9/11, post 9/11 practices and standard operating procedures made people aware of zero trust. Similarly, in a digital world, the zero trust is a new coined old wine in new bottle, if you were to call it, because it's there within us. We do not trust any digital information that comes to us which is not been authenticated. That's the rule number one, right? Rule number two on a zero trust, which is much inexpensive in my opinion, is consult. When in doubt, consult. I think a lot of people have this pseudo ego or pseudo misnorm that if we consult, we may be perceived as incompetent. If we consult and seek advice, they may be perceived as kind of not so savvy on the business. Hey, you don't know. I think that's the wrong myth. Today, even to this day, I do consult my IT guy if I see any mails that come to me, which is in the spam folder, which may have a right subject. Like as Rajesh said, Microsoft.com is a very misleading misnomer there, but at least we need to consult. So the second golden thumb rule, which doesn't cost you anything, is ask the experts. They are a phone call away, they are an email away, they are probably a chat away. I think we tend to not use these, what we call as low-hanging fruits, which are less cost-effective to get into this journey of zero trust. But that doesn't suffice. As we know, there is a cost of doing the business. And the cost of doing the business henceforth is building enough preventive, protective, and probably remediative postures in your cybersecurity environment to ensure zero trust is a strategy in your cybersecurity posture and not an action. So what does that strategy belong to, or where does that strategy come from? In my principles, there are three golden rules for any strategy. One is you need to define that is applicable and relevant to your organization. Two, you need to associate certain set of ownership to execute on it. And three is act on it. It's called SAL, strategy, action, and leadership. When you do that, the first and the fundamental foremost aspect that you got to do in the zero trust is ensure whichever is your controllable elements, whether it could be a device, it could be a user credential, it could be a environment that you access from, the network, the place of network, whatever it could be. Look at what is the level of control you have so that you can give a weightage of zero trust. This is like I was giving an example of in an ATM. ATM is absolutely a zero trust in my opinion. Don't trust even if your cousin brother walking in whom you have certain suspicion, don't let them inside the ATM because you don't know what the intent is. We have seen a lot of people disguising and coming and getting into a lot of issues. So a zero trust has a weighted scale in my definition. And for that, an organization has to prepare a weighted scale on zero trust actors under certain what we call as use cases or transactional needs. Absolutely, if you don't map it, you may start draining good money after the bad and still not be protected from a zero trust operating environment. So the third critical element that you got to put in is a mapping of what is your weighted scale on zero trust. And if I really look at that in a digital environment, there are only 4 elements that we believe are the key actors of zero trust. 1 is your device, 2 is your network, 3 is your persona or your profile, and the 4th, which is very important, is your business process. I've seen many people get into this financial fraudulent behavior where a disguised mail from a CEO goes to the CFO to release funds. And I have seen CFOs releasing funds because the business process is so much depending on a trust factor. If you do not have a good business process that also captures the zero trust philosophy, it's not just technology, it's people, process, and technology, right? Always. So when you start to look at the 3 corners of a successful triangle of a business model, is how do you build a resilient business process in a zero trust environment is watching these 4 corners of the zero trust perimeter. Let us take the device posture now. If you really take the device posture, we all know, as Rajesh was talking about BYOD. In the enthusiasm for the cost cutting, I think a lot of enterprises have gone away from the control point. We do have a lot of compromised devices in our network. We do have significant amount of legacy parameters coming into our network as endpoint devices because we have gone away from those days where even pen and pencil were supplied. Office stationery was, in fact, day 1 when I joined. I'm not that old, but I'm reasonably old. So when you look at day 1 of your office, when I walked into my first day of work, I had a very interesting desk setup with an eraser, a pencil sharpener, a set of desk books. And along with that, there were certain things that were given to me, which were all supplied by the company. We have gone completely in the enthusiasm for whatever we call as total cost of ownership of operations into BYOD philosophy without transforming from a non-BYOD to bring your own devices or bring your own stuff. There is a lot of people used to make fun. You will bring your own chairs, you will bring your own coffee mugs, you will bring your own stuff. I think we have gone to the other side of the extreme, which has probably, in my opinion, has entertained zero trust. We are the root causes of trying to shift our practices, standard operating procedures, into something more on a cost factor, introducing zero trust even before we were prepared to manage that. So devices are the very critical element of zero trust. Ensure that any uncontrolled perimeter, you need to have control on that, and that is the only way we can protect it. The second key actor is the network. How many of us, knowing that airports and some common places are still vulnerable for man-in-the-middle attacks or some kind of sniffing the data, we still log into our bank accounts? I mean, trust me, I have taken some pictures that I was trying to show it to somebody in the vigilance department. I've taken people's pictures unknowingly where they are accessing their bank account sitting in the airport. Come on, don't tell me you don't have 5 minutes at your private time in your house to access in a secured environment, trusted environment, to access your bank accounts, and all the time that you had in such a busy schedule is to access your critical private data in an airport environment. I mean, ridiculous. That is, again, in my opinion, the network that you use, always assume it is zero trust. So the network that you are using, this is like, we don't go on a ring road at midnight assuming there will be patrolling, right? We'll be cautious, we'll lock our doors, we will raise our windows, we'll probably be very cautious of any vehicles following us. That is network. Network is nothing but where you are transacting and data is in motion. Trust the network as zero trust. Don't trust the network just because it is given by Tech Mahindra or Cycurex or Microsoft or XYZ. It is not trusted. That is the fundamental element, which is zero trust. The third element is your credentials, your user persona. I do see that there are a lot of people who unknowingly or unintentionally are sharing information, which I call as persona. Please understand, you cannot share your persona trusting somebody. And the most weak non-trusted touch point that I have seen is cab drivers in the days when we used to travel. There was a time, like a lot of earlier Aesop stories, we can now say those days when we were traveling, right? Because of all this pandemic, we have literally forgotten traveling. But if you look at to your traveling days, you would give your phone number, your name to your cab driver who was going to pick you up. And guess what? He not only has your contact details and your name and your look and feel, but also your home address, because he's going to drop you to your home. So you're completely exposed your identity to somebody whom you don't even know his background, his trust. How do you do that? There is a very interesting zero trust concept that we have learned through this, where we try to eliminate using unknown drivers, using unknown sources of cab drivers, unknown sources where you have not authenticated the transport company. Similarly, in a digital environment, never trust the persona that comes to you in a disguise, like this Microsoft.com. Email is a persona that comes to you as an ID. You don't trust it. Even if it comes from Sunil@Sycurex.com, see whether Sunil is SUNIL or SUNII. Because we get deceived because of what we call as our perception of reality. A lot of times we forget that we are in a very different world. The last but not the least is business process. Build enough checks and balances in your conventional business processes so that you are not allowing technology to override you, because zero trust environment, business processes also have to be defined and calibrated for zero trust. So in a nutshell, Mr. Bharani, I think my philosophy is zero trust is only in these four corners. As long as you manage within that four corner boundary, trust me, your chances of failing are very less.
Wonderful, wonderful, Sunil. Really appreciate that. Great insights. So when you talked about these, four different postures, right? The device and the network. Let me just talk about those two. Now with this work from home situation, right? We all know that about 95% of the people are working from home. So how do we really look at this vulnerability, right? And how important zero trust is in this kind of a situation, when even companies are looking at extending this work from home situation to maybe second quarter or third quarter of 2021, or maybe it becomes a new norm. With that said, how important zero trust is going to be in this kind of a situation?
Excellent point, Bharani. I think this new norm is changing the way we behave, right? I mean, just like how I used to carry my entire check-in baggage as cabin baggage in those good old days before 9/11, where I would put all the rasam powders, sambar powders when I used to travel, and nobody would stop me. And I would even I've seen people carry whatnot in their cabin baggages. We have gotten used to a new norm, right? Similarly, working from home will be as you rightly said, new norm. Even very orthodox and conventional and traditional businesses are expanding their operating models to allow people to work from home because of whatever valid reason, because we have all realized in the last 7 months, life is more important than lifestyle. So we don't care about which cars we drive, which homes we live. We just want to live. So that means we have to energize the work from home. So there are two critical elements that I always see when people are extending working from a known perimeter to working from an unknown perimeter, which is from your physical boundaries of your office, you're extending that into somebody else's Timbuktu house. Two very critical elements. One is, who taught us fundamental discipline of keeping yourself safe in an environment of untrusted environment? These are practices. So my suggestion to a lot of people who are extending this working from home is, typically you build certain practices. What are those practices? I think Rajesh touched upon them briefly. Anonymize your identity. One of the very fundamental rule of extending your working from home concept is, try to see whether you can adapt techniques where you can anonymize your endpoints, which is very important. So there are a lot of technologies available to anonymize, so that you do not recognize yourself as Bharani when you're logging in on a system. You will be probably Tom. People search for Tom, they don't find Tom, so they don't worry about it. But you are basically concealing your identity. So concealed identity is one very critical element. The second critical element for working from home that we are forgetting is, it's not about protecting the endpoint. It is also protecting your asset being accessed. A lot of people assume that my asset is protected already because you have firewalls, you have significant amount of investment you have done on various PAM tools, IDAM tools, your whole whatever unified threat management, UTM boxes you put in, you have probably a gazillion layered locks. Trust me, not number of locks determine your security. It is the way those locks are protecting your data. So a lot of times when you're exposing your critical assets or your business infrastructure to people working from home, significant amount of effort has to happen on preparedness on the other side of the table, not just always suspecting BYOD could be the culprit. This guy may be using a Windows 7 unpatched operating system device accessing the system. I think those days are gone where I don't think we are that ignorant of not protecting our device, because it's not just for work we use our endpoints. We use it for our banking or private work. We are very cognizant of sharing things on Facebook. So my suggestion to people who are extending working from home is to always look at a two-pronged approach or a two-sided of a coin. One side of a coin is how well are you guarded on your delivery mechanism or on your exposure mechanism. First, fix that. Do you believe that you have got enough checks and balances before you expose your environment? On the other side, ensure that anonymize the endpoint so that you have a very strong perspective of what is being accessed. And I don't know whether Rajesh touched upon that in detail because of time constraint, but this whole overlay network concept that is coming up in software defined perimeters are putting a lot of enhanced security by ensuring that you are not only concealing or anonymizing your endpoints, but you are also going on a network that is like your what you call a shielded network. This is like a convoy going with somebody being protected in the middle of the convoy. You are wrapping up with a network that is absolutely concealed. So that's the way working from home is going to emerge. Yes, those who get it first will be very successful in their business transformations. Those who feel, I don't want to spend this and become penny pinching and pound foolish, they will come on the bandwagon at some point of time. Like I've seen still many airports in the early days, people who still carry a lot of liquids, a lot of half a liter shampoo in their cabin baggages. It was ignorance. Despite telling you cannot carry more than 100 milliliters of stuff, people have been ignorant in saying, let's see whether he catches it. Who are the losers? They have to either check in, or I have seen many people, especially smokers, I've seen a lot of them lose very expensive lighters because of that ignorance. People throw a lot of things because we are prone to disobey. That is our culture. So if the working from home philosophy has not changed to obey the discipline and principles of working from home, I don't think working from home will be an easy option for businesses.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sunil, thank you very much. And one more observation I made from your speech was that now the very first step to adoption of anything is to create awareness. I think that is where the entire journey should start. And that's a great point. It's applicable to everything, just not only this particular topic, but any topic that we could talk about. All right. So over to you, Rajesh. So now we talked about the zero trust, and we would like to understand about the trends, right, in zero trust. So if an organization wants to kind of focus on implementing zero trust, right, what should they be just looking at? What should be the priorities? Is it something with a lot of issues happening with the insider threats? Should I be focused on that first, or should I be just working on this almost the agile perimeter that we talked about? Should I focus on that first, or should I be working on awareness, or should I be just also implementing some new tools and software that could help me with like say the zero trust policies that can be implemented across the organizations, or the application needs to be protected? So what should be my priority, and how are the trends in the industry, so that the viewers here will be able to understand and then maybe try and take some tips from here and follow that based on your advice?
Yeah, good question, Bernie. I think it is not mutually exclusive. It has to be a comprehensive kind of an approach, because, if you don't plug the leak at one point and plug the leak at another point, you still have the leak in the entire system. So you have to take into cognizance both the aspects. But the trends that we are seeing with respect to zero trust, it is becoming more and more prominent, especially when organizations are making a move from on-premise applications to cloud-based applications. that is becoming even more important, especially because everybody now wants to virtualize their networks, virtualize their IT functions, virtualize everything. And when they're taking that virtualization, which is primarily being facilitated by the containerization that is happening in the industry, that's where the containerization as well as the zero trust is going hand in hand. So especially people who are making that shift from on-prem applications to cloud applications, whether it is a hybrid cloud or a full cloud in terms of hybrid, a combination of private and public, or it is purely a public cloud, we're seeing a lot of focus towards zero trust. And also, if you talk about organizations like banks, some of the largest banks in India, now they're getting used to a new normal wherein their IT staff, which never worked outside the corporate environment, they're working remotely. They're working from their respective homes. The branches are logging into applications remotely. So all of that has to be secured. That's where there is an increased realization towards zero trust. I'm not saying that everything is gone to a higher level of maturity. We still have many sites that are still on HTTP. They're not even on HTTPS, right? So it is a continuous progression. That maturity and is a continuous journey. One more thing I also wanted to share with everybody. India was supposed to publish the national cybersecurity policy that was due in March 2020, and it got delayed because COVID happened. And now that we are in the 5th phase of unlock, they wanted to go and publish the paper. Then the Honorable Prime Minister intervened, and he said that no, don't publish the paper because working from home has become a new reality. And then you need to incorporate or include the best practices that are there with respect to working from home. If you don't take the work from home kind of a scenario into that particular paper, then you're ignoring a very important cybersecurity posture in the country. So you have to think about that how do you, what are the best practices from work from home, and how such best practices can be built on zero trust is a new requirement that has come from the Prime Minister's office. And that's how the level of importance that is being assigned to the zero trust network architecture. I'm not saying that once you put the zero trust, you can manage the internal threats. No, you won't be able to manage the internal threats completely, but you can minimize it to a large extent.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, all right. So I think, Sunil, back to you. I know, we've been just talking so much about zero trust, and I would like to also understand, like say, what are the offerings from the market? I mean, are there any new tools, products? I know that your company also has something called SAFE, right? I mean, how does this address a zero trust situation right now? And is your product kind of like say ready to use? And again, when we talk about implementation and like say adoption, whatnot, it's going to take a little while. So how does your product, right, SAFE, address the situation right now?
Thanks for the opportunity to do some little bit of talking about what we do. So let me give you a little bit of evolutionary path of zero trust tools, right? So that you can position where we are and what we are trying to do in that context. If you really look at the zero trust philosophically, it is an evolution of as and when the threat actors started to mature. The more the competitive thief is, the better the police force has to be. I mean, we can debate on that, but at least the way now, if you look at the customs tracking drug traffickers, they used to only check your pockets, then they started to check your belt, now they check everything, right? So there are people who are concealing various things in various forms. So the detection mechanism also changes and adapts itself to the threat management or threat levels of concealing. So if you look at the zero trust, the evolutionary path has been predominantly zero trust came on the identity first, then came on the devices, then came on the business processes, and then came on the network. Typically, since the network was all within a physical boundary, and we were all called in IBM days when I used to be part of IBM, it was called a blue network. And people were so proud, the IT department, that nobody can hack into our blue network because it was all contained and which was within a physical boundary, which was very hard to break the whole quorum, right? So that the evolutionary path of threat vectors that emerged into zero trust, network came the last. So that network as the most recent but very challenging one, because network is prevalent everywhere. So the tools also emerged. There are a lot of tools that claim themselves that they can protect you on identity management to start with, which is where the initial zero trust emerged. Then there are a couple of tools in the industry that talk about how they can manage your device posture by ensuring they can disconnect your device if the device is compromised on a zero trust basis. Then came the business processes. A lot of organizations morphed their business processes to manage zero trust. But there are very few players in the network-based zero trust environment, because that was until recently was not prone to be zero trust, because we were walking into an office, we had a badge reader, we had a company supplied laptop, we had 3 security guards with all the nice things to watch you whether you are really an employee wearing it and going through. So there was a lot of other security parameters taken into consideration. And so network was, I shouldn't say ignored, but least of their problems, because it was well within the system. And as long as the T1 line or the external line was protected, they were reasonably comfortable, not managing the network on a zero trust basis. But where we are ending up with the current zero trust is the most prevalent, most widely spread actor, which is called network. So our product suite, or if you really look at the new emerging technologies that are coming up, they are now more and more addressing the network-based zero trust access, because they are now ZTNA, zero trust network access. If you really look at the whole transformation of the industry, they're all now have thought they can manage the other actors, but not the network. So there are a few biggies that in the market. Obviously, the Palo Altos and the Zscalers of the world have always evolved from, because they were already there in the business line when the zero trust was emerging, right? They did some network before they came into network access, zero trust based one. They have done some few things, but we entered the market in 2018, or we started to develop the product in 2018. The product is called SAIFE, SAIFE, which basically keeps your network safe, your endpoint safe, and your data safe. So we said, let the safe be a very important synonym for data safety, your network safety, and your entire philosophy of zero trust being managed. We have a product in its working condition. We have got few BFSI customers. We have got certain global customers who are using this product for embarking onto zero trust environment journey. Yes, we also have baked into managing zero trust on identity, zero trust on device, and zero trust on location also built into our product. So we did a lot of people do a right shift, we did a left shift. We entered the market at the highest and most critical point of zero trust on network and moved left shift to location, device, identity, and business process management. One of the very important message that I want to give to the audience today on the people who are exploring zero trust or in the already on the journey of zero trust, trying to attain effectiveness and efficiency, is always try to look out for capabilities on a zero trust environment where you can configure them to your policies. One of the very major delimiting factor when you get into a zero trust is you may trust your cook. Just because your friend comes and says, never trust cooks, you don't want to lose out the trust you have already built of the cook. What others experience could be a data point for you, but need not be in your context. So a lot of people are embarking on a journey assuming zero trust is a single size fits all. No, zero trust is a very contextual, very real time, and extremely specific to any business process or any business working environment. It is not like we don't trust our drivers because some driver cheated somebody, right? So similarly, we did not want to adopt technologies and tools which are partially relevant to us. So my guidance to all the people who are looking at becoming effective and efficient in managing the zero trust environment that we have created is to look out for what is the right fit. Some people have got significant vulnerability in the context of where we believe devices are vulnerable, where we believe network is vulnerable, where we believe identity could be vulnerable. You pick the whichever on a weighted scale is most important to you, and safe in the current context, what we have got it into the market has a reasonable balanced weightage on all the 4 parameters. We would be more than happy to demonstrate whoever is interested. And we are also a budding company, but backed up by a $60+ billion conglomerate called Hindujas. So we are not a startup in all characteristics, but not startup in the context of that. We have a very interesting journey. So looking forward to engaging with Hysia and its partners if we can help them protect themselves and prevent some untoward incidents in this very deadly digital world that we have all started to live in.
All right. So thank you very much, Sunil, and good luck. Good luck with your product. I'm sure it's quite a matured, product, considering all those different aspects of, zero trust. And I think, as you rightly said, not new. And I think with your expertise, you've done a great job with the product. The features are very impressive as well. So Rajesh, now I know we just have another about 7 minutes. Maybe your final, words, maybe suggesting the audience here that everybody is different. Everybody's security postures are different. Again, do they have the deep pocket or not? But what is my first priority? What do I just kind of look at protecting first, right? All that. I'm sure, like Sunil articulated so well that it should be, or, so what is your recommendation and your final thoughts and advice to the audience?
Yeah, advice to the audience is in terms of in the current new normal, it is not alone the responsibility of an organization to safeguard yourself. Safeguard the employees or the employee assets or the employee information, including the business information. It is a collective responsibility. Earlier, when people were working from the organization context, in an office, everything was done for them. It is like do it for me, right? If you have any issue, then you would call up a network person, or you would call up a security person or an infrastructure person, help desk person, and then they would do everything for you. But now we are working from a home environment perspective. So it has gone into a do it yourself kind of a thing. That's why, it's a paradigm shift. So from that perspective, in terms of securing an organization asset from a data or from an information perspective is going to be a shared responsibility. And most of it comes from awareness, and most of it also comes from what I call as alertness. In my own example I gave you, I was not alert, as a result of which I was susceptible. Thank God it was a phishing attack from the organization just to bring in the awareness level. Had it been a phishing attack from somebody else, I not only would have compromised my own information, I would have also compromised an organization's information. So from that perspective, awareness is important, alertness is important, and also in terms of focus on some of these emerging technologies is important. So these are the 3 things that I would like to give as a takeaway, or at least as an advice to the attendees. You're on mute, Bunny. Bunny, you're speaking on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh. Absolutely. Also, good piece of advice, including me, right? So, I also just gone through many different times. I've been a victim of some of these phishing attacks. So, I think in this audience as well, I'm sure everybody would appreciate that. Some way or the other, at some time or the other, everybody would have just gone through that experience of phishing, right? Not that everybody became victims, but sometimes people become very cautious and then ignore and move on. But definitely everybody is very susceptible, and we have to be very careful. And as I'm waiting for some questions, Gentlemen, great insights, wonderful conversation with you. And to just summarize, I think when I was growing up, and rather like say even now, people do talk about never have any trust when it comes to money, right? That way, never have any trust in the corporate world when it comes to data, right? Data security. So zero trust is the way to go, and I'm sure people do understand the importance. And as we rightly said, the first step to adoption of zero trust is awareness. And another important point that Sunil mentioned is that when in doubt, ask experts. So never just kind of
Seems like there is a bad
Looks like
connection.
Bharni lost his broadband or something. So thank you, Rajesh, and thank you, Sunil. I think that was a very interesting, perspective on cybersecurity and security in general. I have a very interesting anecdote. Some months ago, we hosted a session on ethical hacking, and it was a paid session. And what happened is the people who were hosting that session, they found a loophole in our site where it was since it was a paid event, and they could register without paying.
Okay.
So they hacked our own our own site. So yeah, it is a very, very critical thing. Security is a very critical thing. I hope Bharni is back.
Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, gentlemen. I'm not sure when I was lost, but I was talking to a dead laptop here.
Yeah.
Anyway, we do appreciate any questions coming later. We will certainly just compile them and send it out to you to be answered. In the meanwhile, we request any of you guys, if you have any questions, please send it out to, Neeraja at HISIA. So we will just address them and then we'll take it forward.
Bharni, there's
right.
one question. Are there any tools that will help in tracing whether the data has been compromised? I mean, sometimes you may not know that you have been compromised. Are there any tools which will help in tracing whether the data has been compromised?
Yeah, in terms of there are multiple tools that help you to identify whether your data has been compromised, both from an organizational perspective and also from a individual perspective. It depends upon what use you're looking at. For example, there are applications that are available that you can download on your phone, and I recently did one which came through another partner of ours. And then when I downloaded, while it gave a very good security posture or the security score for my phone, it did identify that my personal email, where I use extensively, had 10 different exposures. It not only said that I had 10 different exposures, it also gave sites where such exposures have happened over the years. And I realized that many of those exposures have happened because I kind of used, in those days, gullible days, I used a very, very simple and a generic password, because of which I have had those exposures. So there are tools, but it really depends on what exactly is the requirement. Sunil, do you want to add anything over there?
No, Rajesh, I think data and compromise are two very loaded words in my dictionary. So I can go on and on to say, what do you mean by tracing compromise? I mean, giving access to the data that they should not have access to is the first entry point of compromise. But are they using the data in a non-usable format, or they using the data in a construct or a process that they should not be using? So there are multiple stages of compromise. I think if you were to look at compromise being synonymous in this context as just getting access to something that one should not be having access to the data, I think, yes, there are a lot of tools that protect you, or at least, if not protect, intimate you or alert you when you are access to data, like your contact list in your phone, or your photo library or gallery in your phone, or on your endpoint devices. There are a lot of checks that happen if there have been unknown, unauthorized devices trying to sniff on your laptops, all the way through network sniffers and asset sniffers. One of the most effective tools that we can use in the industry today is Semantic EDR. Semantic EDR tool, which sits on your endpoint, has a very interesting report that gives you who all accessed your laptop, at what duration of time, and how much data was transferred. So if you think there are any suspicious names or unidentified users logging into your device, that's the first step of looking at whether your data has been compromised. So my suggestion is those who are looking at data compromise traceability should install what is called as data management tools, which are dime a dozen available as endpoint device protection tools. Please go buy one of them and you'll start to see. And key here is compromise is starting with none other than ourselves. We are the causes of allowing people to compromise our data. It's like leaving your cash on the table when there are 100 people around you. You cannot blame the people or person who takes the cash. It is the guy who left the cash on the table should be blamed. So it's very important. Data privacy and data protection is something that I appreciate people look at it as they are the root causes of data pilferage and compromise. So the action starts with protecting your environment.
So the semantic EDR stands for semantic endpoint detection and response. So I think that's a good, definitely a point. Okay, so you know what? There's one more question that came up.
No, he's just thanking Sonu.
Yeah, it's a comment.
Already. Okay, sounds good. Gentlemen, thank you very much again. Appreciate all your time and absolutely very, very insightful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we'll again, keep troubling you once in a while to, deliver this great, speech. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
As well.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you so much for hosting us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, Rajesh.